For those of you that are thinking, well, that's just not me. I'm not going to be nicey just because other people are so sensitive. To be clear, I'm not asking you to be nice. I'm asking you to be kind. They are different. I can be nice, but I'm not always nice. Nice generally refers to being pleasant or agreeable. In the South, we'd say being sweet, while kind implies a deeper level of compassion and concern for others, even when it might not be convenient or immediately beneficial to oneself. Kindness comes from a place of genuine caring, while niceness might have a more superficial motivation, like wanting to be liked or praised. So I'm not always nice, but I strive to always be kind. Nice is saying, okay, when you disagree. Kind is firmly advocating for your patient while showing respect to the person you're working with. Kind is gently correcting the person who's about to make an error and harm a patient. Kind is being generous with your knowledge and not gatekeeping. Kind is saying the hard thing with compassion.
Hey there, I'm your host, Sarah Lorenzini, a rapid response nurse and educator who loves telling stories to teach critical thinking. This podcast is for nurses who want the knowledge, skills, and confidence to respond to any emergency. With almost 20 years of experience in the ER and critical care nursing, and a master's degree in nursing education, I have a lot of stories to share, and I love to nerd out and break down the pathophysiology, pharmacology, and nurses' role in emergencies. Stories bring learning to life. It is way easier to learn from and remember the stories that my colleagues and mentors have told me than anything I've read in a textbook. And that is why I made this podcast. Every episode is packed full of exactly what you need to know to handle whatever crisis that could arise on your shift. It's one thing to get the right answer on the test, but knowing how to detect when your patient is declining and what to do when your patient is crashing is what will make or break your day and might just save your patient's life.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. I am Sarah, your host, and I am excited to be back. If you are new to the podcast, welcome. If you've been listening for a while, you probably have been wondering why I haven't put out an episode in a month. Well, I am personally navigating a new diagnosis and currently in the throes of a whole extensive cardiac workup and seeing specialists and trying to figure out next steps for me. I'm not quite ready to talk about the details. I kind of want to wait until all of the test results are back and we have a solid plan of care for me. And then I promise I will do a whole episode on this rare diagnosis. But as you can imagine, the nerd in me has been deep diving late into the night, learning all that I can about my condition and treatment options. The whole thing has me really weighing out how I want to spend my time. And I found myself just reveling in and enjoying the mundane, everyday encounters with the people that I love and even with strangers, and just making the most of every day. I just haven't had the oomph to sit down and record and edit an entire episode. But there is something that's been heavy on my heart and a topic that I feel very passionately about that I thought I could easily talk about, and that is the culture of emergency response. Whether you're a bedside nurse or a rapid response team leader, today's episode is for you because we will encounter an emergency at some point or another. All of us will. For me, that's multiple times a day. But you might work in an environment where it's just once a year that an emergency happens. But we all have to be ready for whatever could arise. Unfortunately, much of the preparation we're given is very algorithmic, scientific, like that type of approach to emergencies. But that is only half the skill set needed to effectively respond to emergencies. The other half is how we work together as a team to pull off this coordinated resuscitation dance. I made a post on Instagram over the holiday break about the do's and don'ts of rapid response nursing. And I was blown away with how it resonated with so many of you. My inbox was full of stories from you all, both stories of how empowered a rapid response nurse made you feel, and also stories of terrible rapid response nurses who made you feel stupid or made you question your decision to advocate for your patient. And many stories of when your intuition was correct, even though the rapid response team dismissed your concerns initially. So, while I love the pathophysiology and pharmacology and all the science and nerdy stuff surrounding emergencies, I also want to make space for discussing the softer skills that help us do what is best for patients. And let me tell you, culture eats policy for breakfast. What I mean by that is, you could have the most evidence-based policies in place, but if the culture is nasty, then that is going to be the driving force behind how the resuscitation goes down. So I know you came for the nerdy patho breakdown, but I hope you will stay with me for this episode to hear how to lead effectively under pressure, how to foster a culture of safety, and what it means to empower every member of the team to speak up and advocate. So let's dive in. I want to start with a story from when I was a CVICU nurse. This is over 10, actually 12 years ago. So the details of the case were kind of fuzzy because it wasn't my patient. But the team dynamics for that particular event were unforgettable. I was in a pod with one of the newer nurses. She was fresh off orientation and kind of on the more timid side. I too was fresh off orientation as a CVICU nurse, but I had 8 years of ER nursing experience under my belt when I transitioned to CVICU. So while we were both new to the culture of this unit and to this team, I had years to build up my confidence as a nurse, and she was still working on that part. Evidently, she'd been worried about her patient all day. She'd been texting the providers about her concerns regarding the patient's mental status, breathing, and increasing vasopressor requirement, but she kept being shut down and told things like, oh, he's just delirious. We're going to hold the benzos. Or he just got extubated. Or his oxygen saturation's fine. We'll just send some labs. No one ever actually came to see her patient. In the afternoon, she came and grabbed me and asked me to look at her patient. And I too was concerned and encouraged her to call the provider, not just text, because this patient did not look good. So I sat with her while she made the call, and I overheard the nurse practitioner's obvious annoyance on the other end. So I asked if I could speak to the NP myself because it didn't sound like she was going to come see the patient anytime soon. So I took the phone and said, hey, this is Sarah. This patient looks bad. Something is off. It's more than just normal post-surgical fluid shifts. And this nurse has been trying to advocate for this patient all day, sharing her concerns with you. We're going to need a little more than just a disgruntled order from our labs from you. So I'm happy to call the attending if you feel like you're too busy to help. She said she would come to the bedside. But the patient coded once she arrived, and it was absolute chaos. Everyone was yelling, what happened? What's the last blood pressure? What meds is he on? What did you give him? What are his labs? Have you been checking his chest tube output? What rhythm was he in before this? What's his potassium? The tension of the room was palpable. Tension between the bedside nurse and the NP, between the NP and the attending. I mean, with the exception of the new grad who called the code, this was a room full of very experienced clinicians. Yet people kept having to repeat themselves. The noise level was very high. It was hard to hear what was even going on. The NP started leading the code, but then we had orders coming from both the NP and the attending. The whole thing just felt very clunky, chaotic, and overly stressful. Still being new to how things went in this environment, I did not take a leadership role, but instead focused on pushing the code meds. In my mind, I kept thinking how much smoother this could have gone and whether we could have prevented it altogether if we'd acted more proactively rather than reactively. The knowledge and experience of the people in the room were undeniable, but they were inhibited by the terrible team dynamics. So emergencies like this one are where team dynamics can either make or break patient outcomes. So let's break down all of this into two key areas. I'll put them into two categories. We'll call it being a good leader and creating a culture where everyone feels safe to speak up. They kind of go hand in hand, but let's separate them for now. The nurse did not feel safe because the providers on this unit were notorious for talking down to the nurses and being condescending. And not just the physicians to the nurses, that too is a problem, but the nurse practitioners to the bedside nurses. It was so bad that this hospital that I worked at the time actually hired an outside team facilitator to come in and help the team learn how to talk to each other, We had to go to these mandatory team mediation meetings to help everyone learn to communicate professionally. It was a problem that the culture that existed made this nurse feel afraid to even make the call to the provider. Texting just felt safer and came with less risk of backlash. Guys, that is not okay. This whole hierarchical system that puts nurses at the bottom of this imaginary value ladder benefits no one and absolutely hurts patients. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be leadership. Teams need leaders. But that leader must possess the ability to build up the team around them and be willing and capable to listen to the concerns of the whole team. So let's start with some of the do's and don'ts of team leadership. Whether you're a charge nurse or a new grad that has a nursing student shadowing you, you are a leader in some capacity. So here are some practical do's and don'ts for leading a team during an emergency. Do stay calm and focused. Your team will mirror your energy. If you're frantic or scattered, the room's going to feel chaotic. So take a deep breath. Focus on the next priority and take time to communicate clearly. Don't micromanage. As a leader, your job isn't to do everything yourself. It's to delegate effectively. So identify the strengths of your team members, assign tasks accordingly, trust them to do their jobs, and give feedback, both positive when they're rocking it and maybe constructive, but more on that later. Do use closed loop communication. This is a big one. When you're assigning tasks, make sure your instructions are clear and ask for confirmation. For example, hey, John, can you get the pads on the patient? And wait for John to respond with, yeah, I'll get the pads on. This avoids confusion and ensures that the required tasks are actually being addressed. Don't ignore the quieter voices in the room. Sometimes the person with the most critical observation isn't the loudest, so create space for everyone to contribute. For example, ask, does anyone see something that I'm missing? Is there anything else that we should know as a team? Does anyone else have any concerns that aren't being addressed? This doesn't have to happen during a code. It can also happen after any critical event that seems to even be resolving. One of my favorite PAs always ends the rapids like this. She goes, okay, guys, let's recap. And then she lists out all the reasons for the call, what she observed, what diagnostics and interventions were done, what she suspects is the problem, and what the new plan of care is. Then she says to the room, is there anything that I missed? And does anyone have any questions about the plan of care at this point? And then she thanks everyone for their help, and I absolutely love it. And so does the rest of the team. Next, do debrief after the event. Quick pause. I've got a question for you. Have you ever walked away from a resuscitation thinking, that went pretty well, but how can we be even better next time? Well, I hope you've asked that because that's how we keep getting better and better as clinicians and as teams. Let me tell you about another great podcast that you need to check out. In the Heart of Care is produced by RQI Partners and hosted by Dr. Ash Panchal. You may remember him from episode 140. He's an emergency physician and educator who really understands what it takes to lead when the pressure's on. This show takes you inside the real work of building readiness, what systems and strategies actually hold up during critical events, and how teams train, communicate, and grow from both wins and missteps. You'll hear honest stories from the front lines, lessons from sim labs, and practical tools that can help your team perform better when it matters the most. So whether you're at the bedside, running education, or leading a team, there's something in every episode for you. In the Heart of Care is available now, wherever you get your podcast. Give it a listen. Now, back to the episode. After the emergency is over, gather the team and talk about what went well and what we could improve. Be open to feedback about your leadership too. That's how we grow. There's a lot more on this that I actually share in episode 62, which I called Resuscitation Leadership Beyond the ABCs of Code Blue, and also in episode 123, What Makes for a Great Resuscitationist. But I wanted to focus my episode today on creating a culture where everyone feels empowered to speak up. That is a huge part of team dynamics, and it's especially important in high-stress environments. This is also the biggest takeaway from my post on Instagram, is that the culture that I have worked so hard to build at my hospital is not the case across the country. I can't even tell you how many nurses message me with stories about their horrible experiences. And I don't think they're exaggerating. I have seen threads of this throughout my career, and I want you to know that one bad apple doesn't have to spoil the whole bunch. If enough people band together and demand a safe culture, it can and will happen. And guess what? Nursing happens to be the largest healthcare profession, and there is strength in numbers. So, what do I mean when I say create a safe culture? Well, in a safe culture, every member of the healthcare team feels confident that they can speak up and won't be humiliated, ignored, or blamed. Questions are welcomed and even encouraged because there's this undercurrent of respect and appreciation of each role in the interdisciplinary team that drives the team dynamics. Rather than it's every man for himself, or worse, each person against their peers, there's this overarching growth mindset where we all want to collectively learn from each other and from our mistakes. This is how we perform at our highest capacity as a team. So, let's go over some do's and don'ts that promote the culture of safety. So, you want a culture of safety? Do lead by example. If you want your team to feel safe sharing concerns, you have to model that behavior. Admit when you don't know something. Acknowledge mistakes openly and without defensiveness. This shows that vulnerability is not a weakness. It's actually how we learn. I'll often say, I don't know what this is, but I'm concerned too. Or man, I should have acted sooner when I saw this patient's worker breathing worse. I thought we had more time. When I miss something, I don't keep it to myself. I don't hide it. I tell everyone. Hey guys, can I tell you about the last rapid I went to? I thought the patient was just sleepy, but turns out he had a brain bleed. These are the signs and symptoms that I should have been picking up on, that should have been red flags that I will definitely pay closer attention to next time. Or the patient that was complaining of abdominal pain and I thought he was being a bit dramatic. No, it turns out it was a ruptured esophagus. And here's what I learned from this scenario that I will definitely pick up on in the future. Now we have this group chat with our rapid response team where we share both our great catches and lives saved, but also the things that we've learned because we don't know everything. And I want to create a culture where everyone is on a journey to learning more. I will never arrive at the destination of knowing it all. And that's fine because the journey itself is fun. When I catch a mistake that a nurse made, I always make sure to tell a story of a mistake that I made and learn from too. We are humans and humans make mistakes. When mistakes are ridiculed or punished, then no one will ever speak up when something's wrong. So let's normalize lifelong learning from our peers, and learning from our mistakes. Next, don't dismiss concerns, no matter how small. If a nurse comes to you with a worry about a patient or a process, take it seriously. Even if it turned out to be nothing, your response sets the tone. If you're dismissive, they're less likely to speak up next time. This is something I can't stress enough. And I want to say something that you may disagree with, and I'm willing to discuss it. But I think that provider from my CVICU who was dismissive towards the nurse's concerns is partially responsible for the patient's demise. I know there were so many factors, but what if they had taken her seriously at the beginning of the shift? What if they had caught what was causing his confusion and hemodynamic changes early and treated it rather than just blowing it off? If a nurse calls me with concerns for a patient and I roll my eyes or even sound impatient or annoyed by their concerns, it may not affect this patient. Maybe this patient's fine. But the next patient who does actually have an emergency going on will be affected, but the nurse delays speaking up for fear that they might be seen as annoying or a burden. I always make a point to thank nurses for letting us know about a patient. I've had nurses apologize for having to call a rapid, to which I respond, no apologizing for speaking up and advocating. Having to call a rapid is not a sign of being a bad nurse. It's a sign of being a good nurse who knows sick when they see it and knows how to use their resources to get the patient what they need. So call early and call often. That's what we're here for. Next, do use inclusive language. Phrases like, what do you think? Do you see anything I'm missing? Invite input. When team members feel like their voices matter, they're more likely to speak up. Next, don't tolerate blame or shaming. Emergencies are stressful, and it's easy to snap or assign blame in the heat of the moment, but that creates a culture of fear. Instead, focus on problem solving. If something went wrong, ask, what can we do differently next time? And let me just take an aside and address those of you who are thinking, well, that's just not me. I'm not going to be nicey just because other people are so sensitive. To be clear, I'm not asking you to be nice. I'm asking you to be kind. They are different. I can be nice, but I'm not always nice. Nice generally refers to being pleasant or agreeable. In the South, we'd say being sweet. While kind implies a deeper level of compassion and concern for others, even when it might not be convenient or immediately beneficial to oneself. Kindness comes from a place of genuine caring, while niceness might have a more superficial motivation, wanting to be liked or praised. I'm not always nice, but I strive to always be kind. Nice is saying, okay, when you actually disagree. But kind is firmly advocating for your patient while showing respect to the person that you're working with. Kind is gently correcting the person who is about to make an error and harm a patient. Kind is being generous with your knowledge and not gatekeeping. Kind is saying the hard thing with compassion. Two things come to mind when I think about this whole nice versus kind. First one, I recently arrived to rapid response a few minutes later than my colleague Marissa. She beat me there. Patient was an 86-year-old who was actively dying from a long battle with a terminal illness. The daughter was having a hard time moving towards palliative care and still wanted everything done for her mom, who had previously expressed wanting to be a DNR. Nice would have been to say, okay, we'll do everything we can to save your mom if that's what you want. But I walked in to find Marissa kneeling on the floor next to this patient's daughter, holding her hand with her arm around her saying, your mom is dying. I know this is hard, but we are at a crossroads. Do we bring her back to the ICU and put a breathing tube in, attach her to a ventilator, and give her high doses of vasopressors that require even more invasive interventions and monitoring? Or do we keep her here and make her comfortable as she passes? This is hard, I know, but please think about what she would want. Because of Marissa's firm kindness, we were able to transition to palliative care for this patient who'd been in our hospital for weeks and bouncing back and forth from PCU to ICU. That is kindness in action. The other imagery that comes to mind is from Wicked. I've watched it 4 times, y'all, and there are so many lessons in that story. I literally sat in my car with my bestie and we talked for hours about it after we watched it together. It's so good. If you haven't seen it, you are missing out. And you should do so. So this is your spoiler alert. Go ahead and fast forward 30 seconds and come back later once you've seen the movie for yourself. Okay, so here's what I think of when I think about kind versus nice. So Galinda is always letting people know how nice she is, and she's praised for her niceness, which is often equated as goodness by her peers. But her motivation is superficial, just to be liked or to feel good about herself, I guess. However, Elphaba is the one who is actually kind, as she deeply cares for those who are oppressed or ostracized in society, and she is willing to stand up to the oppressor and fight for what is right, even if it cost her reputation and status. Now, it's not a perfect parallel to nursing, but the takeaway for me is, who cares about being nice? In a world where superficial things are praised and prioritized, let's choose kindness and let compassion be the driver for how we interact with our peers and with our patients. Thank you for listening to my sermon from the book of Wicked. Let's summarize all of my passionate ramblings. So effective leadership during emergencies means staying calm, delegating effectively, using clear communication, and debriefing after the fact. Creating a culture of safety means modeling vulnerability, taking all concerns seriously, using inclusive language, and avoiding blame and striving for kindness in every interaction. When you combine strong leadership with a supportive culture, you create a team dynamic that's not just effective, but also empowering. And that is what leads to better patient outcomes. So, thank you so much for tuning in today. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with your colleagues and leave a review. I would love to hear your thoughts and stories about team dynamics, so hit me up on Instagram. I'm the Rapid Response RN. And until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Before you go, I have an exciting announcement. You can now earn CEs for listening to this podcast. That's right. Our Renegade has teamed up with podcast hosts like me who are delivering amazing content that not only educates, but inspires you to be the best for your patients. You get to learn and earn continuing education credits while absorbing knowledge from thought leaders and innovators in the field of health and medicine. You're already listening to podcasts during your commute, at the gym, or while unwinding after a long day. So why not earn your CEs at the same time? And that's where pod classes come in. Yep, it's just what it sounds like. It's CE learning through podcast. To learn more, I put a link in the show notes for you. Well, thanks for listening. I hope you learned something that will save a life. Remember, nursing is a team sport, so trust your intuition and don't give up advocating until you are confident you've done what's right by your patient. The views and opinions expressed on this show are that of Sarah Lorenzini's. That's me and mine alone. They are not intended as medical advice and should not take the place of your institution's policies or procedures. Evidence-based practice is ever-changing, and your patient care should reflect the current best practice. So if you want to get in contact with me, you can shoot me an email at sarah@rapidresponsern.com or on all social media platforms as the Rapid Response RN.